Good afternoon, everybody. Apparently, Switzerland neighbors have no respect for Swiss watches. That's why previous large meeting started late, and that's why we are starting late as well because of that. Thank you all for being here. We are supposed to discuss, to look into the future. Not the very distant future, but the very proximate one. And to think what is going to happen in the Arab world, to the Arab countries. And for that, we have 5 extremely well-established speakers for that. The future is made of a number of events we can predict. I can tell you that that part of the world is going to be affected by elections in Israel on March the 17th, or elections in Turkey in June. I can tell you that there are also other expected events, like, for example, if the oil price remains below $60, that's 20% of what it was like 6 months ago. It means that political money is going to flow in much smaller figures to various conflicts. This we can predict. We can also predict that in the next few months, open battles are going to be waged, like the battles the alliance is waging against ISIS in Iraq and partly in Syria. This we can also predict. What we cannot predict are political events that have impact on the situation, but are to a certain extent unpredictable, not to their realization, but to their timing. Of course, we all knew that, as we say in Arabic, ages are in the hands of God. We all knew that the King of Saudi Arabia was 94, but nobody knew that he will pass away now. And we also know that this is going to have an impact, and that the passing away of other leaders in that part of the world can also have impact. So we have events we can predict, not necessarily their effect. We don't know who's going to win this or that election, but their realization, and other events we need to get ready for. That is why we have people who have been in responsible position and can come back to responsible position, who are now in responsible position, as is the first one to address the issue. That is the Prime Minister of Morocco, Mr. Ben Kiran, who is now, I would say, an habitué of Davos. Mr. Ben Kiran, the floor is yours. How do you see the next year or two from your point of view?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أولا أترحم على جلالة الملك عبد الله، شخص أثر فيا ليس كملك خوي فقط ولكن كشخص مؤمن بالله.
I'm sorry, there is no translation, but I will summarize for non-Arabic speaker, because Mr. Ben Kiran is the only one who is going to speak in Arabic. I'll summarize his statement at the end.
Je suis devenu un habitué, mais vous avez perdu l'habitude de traduire.
Je vais traduire.
ثانيا يعني ثقافتنا مبنية على التفاؤل، وأنا متفائل إن شاء الله الرحمن الرحيم للمستقبل. بطبيعة الحال الأمور ليست سهلة، لا تبدو سهلة، لكن إذا كل طرف فهم دوره الطبيعي والحضاري الذي هو أن يساهم في أن يتقدم بلده، تتقدم أمته، وأعطينا اليد لبعضنا البعض، إن شاء الله الرحمن الرحيم تكون الأمور يعني جيدة. وأظن أنه نحن وإن كنا جميعا أبناء ثقافة واحدة ونتلو كلام الله باستمرار لا نفقهه جيدا. هنالك أمران في القرآن الكريم، الأمر الأول بالتعاون على البر والتقوى، والأمر الثاني بعدم التنازع. نحن تركنا التعاون، ذهبنا إلى التنازع، وهذا ما نحاول أن نتجنبه في المغرب، وهذا ما بحمد الله إلى حد الآن ترك المغرب يعني لنقل في العموم دولة الأمور فيها تسير بطريقة إيجابية.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Could you summarize rapidly? Or do you want me to do that? Okay. Well, he basically said that in the Quran, there are at least two instructions to human beings not to get into conflict and cooperate. And that we have been in the past few years doing the conflict side, but not so much cooperation. He believes that Morocco is leading the way into establishing forms of cooperation in the near future. This is a very quick summary. I am moving now to a country at war, we can say that, at war.
Yes.
And the former Prime Minister of Iraq, Iyad Allawi, is going to sort of tell us how he sees the next 12, 18 months.
So shall we speak in English or
Yeah,
Arabic?
please do.
Okay. In fact, the transformation, we are in the middle of transformation now. Not only Iraq, but the region as a whole. And we don't know, we cannot predict precisely what will be happening in the near future, let alone the distant future from now. I think we face severe variables, including now in the Arab world, including, of course, bloodshed and turmoil, foreign interventions, interferences. And we have at least a score of states which have been dismantled and are non-functional anymore, like Libya, like Yemen, like even Iraq to some extent, Syria, and so on. The Palestinian issue is still, the peace process is still stalled. Nothing is happening to push the peace process forward. And this is one of the sources of problems in the Islamic world, in the world, and in the Middle East. I believe the first and foremost important part of what we have to do before we can think of the future is to secure the stability of the countries involved in the turmoil that these countries are facing. Iraq is facing sectarianism, is facing extremism, as in Daesh, and is facing a problem of governance. I see both Syria and Iraq as one theater, really. ISIS is not separated. It's all fixed, and now it's moving into other places in the region. And we have heard from our Libyan brothers that it's moving into Libya also, ISIS. But really, there is a very serious challenge. What will determine, to some extent, the future with a comfortable degree of certainty is what is going to happen now for these countries, especially in the wake of the death of the late King Abdullah, who was one of the stabilizing factors in the Middle East. Our problem now is to face the most extreme, most dangerous thing, the bleeding condition that ISIS is causing. And frankly speaking, I haven't seen a coherent strategy yet to face ISIS. What we see is scattered measures to attack this point or take care of that point. But a coherent strategy, neither on the regional level, nor on the international level, nor even in Iraq itself. I know with the Kurds, they have a strategy. The parts of institutions in Baghdad have a strategy, and so on. But we don't have a coherent strategy. We're all, I think the missing point of what has happened, and we don't want to go into details, that facing ISIS depends on two themes, on interwoven themes. The first is military, where we have to use the military capability, whether it's pulling intelligence, whether it's special forces, whether it's aerial bombardment, and so on. And then there is a political theme, which is most important. If you don't get the people together and to buy in to the political processes in these countries in question, then no matter what winning you can make on the military side, you will be a loser at the end of the day. I know I speak to many people in Mosul and Tikrit and Anbar, and they say, what if we fight Daesh, where shall we end? Are we going to be accused of being Ba'athist again, or terrorists, or how can we, or are we going to be considered as second-class citizens in the country? So I think this is this is where the problem lies, is first of all how we can get rid of ISIS, so at least we can see the future more clearly. The future we believe in is that we need to have democratic states, unified states. We need collaboration. We need growth and stability. And stability will not be ensured unless there is security. And this is the only thing we want to see in the future, including, of course, the resolving the Israeli-Palestinian question through the negotiations and the peaceful process where the Palestinians will get their rights. So really to be precise and to forecast what is going to happen in Libya, for example, or what's happening in Iraq is very difficult. And frankly speaking, I think that we should be very clear that to win this war and to create stability and to get the Libya again and Yemen and Iraq and Syria and so on resolved, it's very difficult because the transformation is happening. We don't know where it's going to lead. We know there are many variables interacting. We know the international community is more concerned about their own problems and paying attention, rightly so. And we know that there are in the region a race to dominate the region between various regional players. Thank you.
Dr. Iyad, we are certainly no prophets, but I am still a bit stuck, and certainly in the public. From the very first communique on ISIS, the American government has said that you added a sentence saying that the fight against ISIS is going to take a lot of time. And recently, General Dempsey, the chief of staff, said that it may take 30 years. This morning, both Kurdish Iraqi and Iraqi officials were telling us that things are going in the right direction, that they are recapturing territory, that it is not going to take so much time. I think the public would like your opinion on that. I mean, how much time is it going? The victory is at the end of the road, inshallah. Well,
Inshallah.
how much time is it going to take?
But we can't depend on inshallah, really, if there is no action. And the problem I see, and I said it, and I say it in the government, of course, in Baghdad, and I was amazed by the statements that came this morning of exaggerating what is happening.
Progress.
I can't lay a timetable for what and when, for a simple reason, because we don't have a strategy, and Iraq does not possess a strategy. And there is no real coordination and cooperation between Kurdistan and Baghdad on this issue. And the international alliance, which are involved in bombardments for the last three months or so, have not achieved anything really, except preventing ISIS from moving and taking Erbil, and twice preventing ISIS from taking the periphery of Baghdad and coming to the center of Baghdad. My information that ISIS are now much more capable than they used to be. They are recruiting people. They are making use of the chaotic atmosphere that have been created. They are making use out of the militias that have been deployed in Iraq. They are taking advantage of foreign fighters who are coming to the aid of the Iraqi government and to the Iraqis. And they are taking advantage of the portraying of the problem as a Sunni and Shi'i problem, which is not. It's a group of extremism who are trying to impose their will on the Iraqi people. But this is really what's happening. I think we, with all my respect to our colleagues in the government, we can't, inshallah, yes. But inshallah, if there is nothing, God says that help yourself, so I'll help you.
Dr. Mahmoud, your role has been crucial in the Libyan sort of upheaval against Colonel Gaddafi 3 years ago. Then Libya was an extremely positive place, and full of optimism and everything. And somehow, at one point, it took the wrong turn. How do you see Libya and the neighborhood of Libya in the next 18 months?
Well, I'm a little bit hesitant of predicting anything, because when I predicted by late 2011 what's taking place in Libya right now, I was accused of being pessimistic, and that I am always look at the black side, you know, and the empty side of the glass. I'm sorry to say that if things continue the way they are in the region, the way we deal with the current situation, things are going to get worse. And here's my reasons. You know. First, I think the structural problems which exist in the region are still there. There is a lack of alignment. This is the first gap between the national economies of the Arab world and the global economy. Rarely, if you find any national economy in the Arab world which did what we call in the visioning exercise, positioning that economy within the context of the global economy. You do the positioning to discover the competitive edge, where you can mobilize your national resources around it. Those resources, whether natural resources or human resources. Then you start aligning the subsystems with this national economy, whether it's the political system, allow for more participation, whether it's the social system, you deal with the values that hinder the participation and the work value, whether it's the cultural, which is the most important, the education. It has nothing to do with the 21st century. So we employ in our governments out of fear that those kids might run to the streets. Not we employ because the economy is growing and new vacancies are available, you know, to assimilate more. Even if the economy is competitive enough, you will not find that the subsystems, the education has nothing to do with the needs of the economy. Our culture, our values, they have nothing to do with what's needed for the national economy to be competitive. So these are two holes between the subsystems and the national economy, and between the national economy and the global economy. Then there is those who are coming out because they've been marginalized. They didn't find jobs. They became extremists. And they continue to be extremists because we are moving in the same vicious circle, you know. We are reinforcing this vicious circle. More hundreds of thousands of young people are coming to the market. They don't find jobs. So they find Daesh, they find Al-Qaeda, which they offer lucrative offers, good salaries, they offer paradise, and they offer even jihad al-nikah. So you name it, it's there, you know. And you cannot
paradise on earth.
Yes, you cannot beat this offer, while the government or the system does not offer the same thing. Therefore, I think the vicious circle is going to continue. What we need is to deconstruct and reconstruct the socialization process. You need a new Arab mind to be compatible with the future. You need a new Arab mind to deal with the challenges of the 21st century. I'm afraid to say that the future is on the side of extremism. Why is that? If you look at Daesh, for instance, first, the structure of age in Daesh today is between 15 and 25 years old. While it was in Al-Qaeda during the late 70s and 80s, it was from 25 to 35 years old. More professionals are coming to Daesh because it became fashionable, Daesh. Not only this, they are very skillful in technology. So technology is serving them better. The age bracket is serving them better, while the Arab systems are dealing the same way. Are we going to witness the end of Arab uprising? No, as long as those holes in the structures of the Arab world are there, whether in our cultural systems and our economic systems, lack of alignment between all those systems I think the uprising will continue to happen, and extremism is going to continue to happen. For the Arab regimes, they have to realize that there is a new name for legitimacy: more inclusion and development. The real security for any regime today is development. The real legitimacy for any regime is to embrace its people, to include them, not to exclude them.
Thank you. Amr Bey, as an Egyptian and as a former Secretary General of the Arab League, you have many reasons to look into the future and to ask yourself what kind of elections you are going to have in Egypt in 2 months from now. Is the donor meeting going to be successful because Egypt needs external financial support? And more generally, how do you see the Arab world evolving in the next 18 to 24 months?
Well, thank you, Hassan. In fact, I wanted to speak in Arabic, like the Prime Minister. And all of us tried, but we were told by the organizers that there's only one exception. It will be given to the Prime Minister, so we'll have to speak in English, starting also with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The elements or the salient points that you mentioned as the basic points for our discussion, you mentioned two things. Number one, the Israeli elections, and two, the oil prices. Well, I don't believe that the Israeli elections do matter for the Middle East. Change in the Israeli policy is what matters. What would influence, affects the future of the region. But changing one prime minister with the other, it is of no relevance to the issue or the subject we are discussing. Number two, the oil prices. Some analysts believe that it is like a curse. There will be a shortage of money and less capability to assist and so on. The other side of the coin is that it could be really a positive change because it will behoove the governments to act on real, correct economic basis, to produce, to develop the economy, and to be serious about developing their state of life. Number three, the revolutions that have taken place, starting with Tunisia, Egypt, etc., have changed the public opinion in the Arab world in its entirety. People now know that they can protest and they can change the regimes. It happened twice in Egypt, it happens in Tunisia, and it will be the order of the day for so many years to come. The change is that it is not easy now to tell the people we are going to have elections or we are going to do this or that, and the ruler expects that the usual, yes sir, or they will not really pay attention. No, it is under scrutiny by all the people now. What the government did, what kind of elections, and why now, and why not tomorrow, and why not yesterday. The public opinion in the Arab world started to play a decisive role, and this will determine the future. The public opinion is taking advantage of the new advances in technology. Not only the internet and the social connections, but the freedom of thought and expression that you see in so many TV stations, in French, in Arabic, in English, etc. So anybody can listen to what happened in France, what happened in Washington, what did Mr. Obama said yesterday, and why did he say that, and the basic point he advanced about the economy of the middle class. This will resonate all over, resonate in the universities, our universities, with our professors of economy, with our policymakers on economy and so on. The Arab world is changing. The youth, young people, who now compose for over 60% of all our population from Morocco to Oman, from Mauritania to Oman. It is a change in not only the age bracket, but the way people think. and the drive behind an opinion or behind a certain request or a certain demand. Now, for example, in Egypt, women, the constitution has stipulated that 25% of all local governments, parliaments, councils will have to be women. If the elections or the government policy of appointment does not reach this 25%, it is unconstitutional. See, so there is a comeback or a real overture for women and their role in the political life. This is very important. It will bring change. It will bring new brains and new attitudes and new reactions. Also, the good governance. I happen to believe that the reason behind the revolutions in the Arab world, the main reason is the bad governance and the cumulative effect of the bad governance. I can say that about Egypt. Certainly there was bad governance that has led to the anger, the frustration that the people felt, and the 25th of January 2011 was no question the result of such a frustration and anger because of the bad governance. Not only in economy, or in social policies, or in security policies, or in geopolitics, the whole thing was wrong. It was one man's decision. This will not come back to the Arab world. It will be because people want to say that we have the right to decide our future. You cannot have just one person decides for you. He has to consult. He has to put things before the public opinion. And here I wish to pay tribute to the King of Morocco because he started this practice and therefore pushed any feeling of frustration or anger or revolution. This is the way we want, but not only this. We have to move into a different, more open government. Democracy, in my opinion, will be the order of the day. The public opinion will not accept dictatorship anymore. Not that this will happen tomorrow, but this is a process, and the process has started. That is why I am optimistic about the future of the Arab world. Linked to all that, as we were discussing, the new order in the Arab world and in the Middle East, I mean, West Asia and North Africa, we will have to discuss a new order and to form one, all of us. The old order will not work, cannot serve the purpose of the future Middle East.
Thank you, Amr. Dr. Arif, you have many reasons to be among us this afternoon. One of them that you are also Libyan and interested in the future of Libya, but also that you have been an extremely sort of traveled observer of political Islam and of Islamic movement in this region. And you were the one who yesterday was telling us that ISIS has established strongholds in your country, in Libya. And you mentioned 5 places where ISIS, so it's no more just Mosul or Raqqa, it's also North Africa as well. And how do you see this is going? I mean, the sort of flat idea is that we are faced with either the barracks or the mosque, and that we have to choose between the two. Are you of this line, or do you think there is a possibility of other alternatives?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt condolences to the people of Saudi Arabia and the Arab world for the passing away of a great king, King Abdullah. And also to just make a quick comment about monarchies and their stabilizing role. Unfortunately, in 1969, we lost our monarch, King Idris, rahmatullahi alayh, through a coup, an army coup. And unfortunately, we've suffered the consequences for 42 years or more. As a matter of fact, we are still struggling to even draft a constitution when we had a perfectly nice constitution going back to the 1950s. But be that as it may, we now have a rise of something quite sinister, which we call ISIS or Daesh. And I believe that It's very important not to see this phenomenon as unique to the Arab world. And part of the way to expand our horizons is to look into history and the history of many civilizations, including the European one. I believe ISIS is nothing else, nothing other than Islamized fascism, basically, or fascism painted with the paint of Islam. I believe that the period we're passing through in history in the Arab world is very similar to the period Europe was passing through towards the beginning of the 20th century. And the same dark forces that led to the rise of fascism in Italy and Spain and in Germany are now leading to the rise of an Islamically painted fascism, which is ISIS. It is no coincidence that the mass executions, the tortures, the degradation of the human being, the hallmarks of fascism are all present in the ISIS phenomenon. So I think it's very important not to see this as an Islamic thing or an Islam thing. I think it is more to do with the will to power. And I think the will to power becomes more acute as people feel scared and threatened. I believe that what is happening in our region is a reaction to the loss of meaning in many ways. And the failure of many of our traditional institutions, especially the religious ones and the cultural ones, to actually not only preserve themselves, but actually revive themselves and renew themselves so as to give meaningful frameworks for young people. I believe that it's a cultural and spiritual crisis that's generating this nihilism. And ISIS is simply an ideology of nihility, of nothingness, of death affirming rather than life affirming. While Islam, as in Christianity, as in Buddhism, as in Judaism, as in all the great faiths of the world, is a life affirming culture. Unfortunately, our institutions that used to affirm life and to celebrate life and to spread ideas of compassion and peace and understanding and forgiveness and humility are giving way to a nothingness. And ISIS basically lives on this nothingness and promotes this nothingness. And that's why I believe that the easiest thing we can do, and it's the worst thing that we can do, is to sink into despair or depression or cynicism about this whole thing. I believe that there is much to be hopeful about. There are intrinsic modes of resilience within the Arab world that are extremely important. I believe the caring of Arab women is an extremely important form of resilience. Libyan women met last week. They met a few weeks ago also. They met last week in Tunisia and before that in Egypt. And their discourse is amazingly life-affirming, amazingly peace-focused, compassion-focused, dialogue-focused. We need to listen to these voices who are an integral part of this Arab Spring, but who unfortunately got suffocated as soon as the Arab Spring was successful by fascist movements that basically deprived them of that voice. There is resilience in our young people. It is not the case that all young Arabs are prone to ISIS. It's still, with the vast numbers that are joining ISIS, it's still a tiny minority of Arab youth. Arab youth do not accept this. They want to reject this, but they're looking to their adults in the society, and they're not finding meaningful discourse. The religious scholars are making no sense. The preaching is not reaching the hearts. The revered institutions of the past are just peddling cliches. We need to renew our culture. We need to renew our discourse and give these young people meaning. And the first thing we should do to give them meaning is to listen to them. This is a second form of resilience that we need to invoke. A third one, which is extremely important, is to respect locality. You know, the state that tries to plan from above and impose its will is another form of fascism. It is also a will to power. We need to listen to the locality, be it a municipality or a township or a clan or a tribe. We need to respect these local forces, the social fabric, and initiate a true, genuine dialogue at the social fabric level that can lead to a consensus that can give us constitutions on which we can have states that are healthy being built. So we need to invoke all these things, and we need to, most importantly, stay hopeful, stay positive, and create networks of goodness and compassion. And that's why we are part of this network at Davos. You can only fight networks of darkness with networks of understanding, appreciation, and mutual respect. And thank you.
Thank you, Arif. I I will take a first round of questions from the public now. With the lady to start with.
Hi.
Present yourself and ask your question as summarized as possible.
I'm Sara Alawi. I actually have a question for Dr. Ayad Alawi. And it's not an easy one either.
Don't you dare to ask it at home.
This is women rights.
You said, in other words, that efforts to strengthen the army and even international bombardments of ISIS alone will not overcome ISIS. You're part of the Iraqi, without a strategy, of course. You're part of the Iraqi government. Why is there no strategy?
Thank you, Jannahi.
What he was saying, I'm sure it's music to the ears of a lot of people who are sitting here, especially the liberals. I'm not one, but I'm sure the liberals are very happy with what he was saying, because that is the cause of the problems that we have today. We talk about ISIS here, but nobody's talking why ISIS started. So a lot of what Mahmoud Jibril was saying is creating ISIS. Now, since Dr. Salama's words were at the beginning, let's look into the next 12 to 18 months. Let's not look ahead of that, but for the next 12 to 18 months, which we cannot be as optimistic as Excellency Amr Moussa for the next 18 months, where do you see, Mr. Mahmoud Jibril, how are we going to fix the issues that you raised, the issue of inclusiveness? Do you see it's going to happen anywhere in the Arab world? That's number one. Number two, do you see this business of cultural shock to get us to the next level in order that we understand and we accept each other? Rather than a wise man was telling us the other night that you abuse somebody with color, then you are racist. You abuse somebody who's Jewish, you're anti-Semitic. You abuse somebody who's a Muslim or Islam, then it's freedom of speech, which is, sorry, even to say it is unacceptable because that is a defeatism from within. So that's Mahmoud Jibril.
Well, I'll take these two questions to start with. Dr. Iyad and then Dr. Mahmoud.
Well, the reason for not having a strategy is really embedded in the problem between the allies, the international alliance, and the way how they see things as far as fighting ISIS, and between the regional vision of what kind of strategy is needed. And Iraq is lost between those two conflicts because Iraq does not have the means to defend itself. The army was dismantled when the invasion took place and when occupation took place. And as we are building the army again, we don't have weapons. We don't have enough ammunition. We don't have weapons. We don't have trained army. The army that we retrieved, unfortunately, suffered a lot of setbacks. And this is where we need the help of foreign countries and alliances who say that they are against ISIS. That's why no strategy has been developed. And indeed, when I speak about the political side, it is important to realize that the only ideology which is binding people now is the Islamic ideology, the Islamization, which have been taken out of context, and Islam have been hijacked, and a group are claiming under the ideology of Islam, because the ideologies that prevailed over the last 2 centuries have not produced anything except chaos and bad management. That's why it's very difficult to have a real strategy to fight ISIS.
Before going to Dr. Jibril, I would like to go back to you, Mr. Benkiran. You somehow represent in Morocco, what should I say, a softer form of political Islam than the one we are discussing here. What is your view of how religion is going to mix with politics and how it can mix positively and how it unfortunately sometimes mix explosively?
شوف يا أخ سلامة، بغض النظر عن الخلفية الدينية أو الإيديولوجية، 3 تيارات تتجاذب العالم العربي. تيار يريد التحكم وأن تبقى الأمور تقريبا كما كانت. تيار متشدد يريد أن يعود بنا إلى مرحلة خلاص لا يمكن أن تعود عليها البشرية إطلاقا، وتيار ديمقراطي يريد أن يأخذ بعين الاعتبار بطريقة معتدلة معطيات الواقع.
So the Arab world is sort of torn between three different political currents. The first one wants the sort of the status quo to remain as is. The second one wants to bring the Arab world back to centuries, which is absolutely realistic. And the third one is democratic trend.
لا مستقبل للمنطقة العربية إلا في الاختيار الوسط، لكن الاختيار الوسط يحارب من الاختيار الأول والاختيار الثاني.
There is no future but for the centrist line. But the centrist line is being fought by the two sides, by those who want to go back to past centuries and for those who want the status quo to remain.
كما قال الأخ جبريل من قبل، حين التحكم يمسك الأمور تكون يعني المطالب غير مستجاب لها، مشاعر غير مستجاب لها، يأتي التشدد ويرد على التحكم. وحين يصبح التشدد هو الذي يهيمن نعود إلى صور يعني مرعبة من التصرفات التي لا يمكن أن يقبلها لا دين ولا منطق، خصوصا في هذه المرحلة التي نحن فيها. التيار المعتدل هو أمل كل من اليوم يوجد في الساحة ويمسك السلطة، لأنه هو الذي يمكن أن يدخل معه الآخرين. لا على المستوى الاقتصادي، الأقوياء دائما يأخذون حقهم، الذين كانوا قادرين على إزعاجهم أخذوا حقهم. الآن بقي الشعوب، يعني الطبقات التي لم تصل لا بد من إدخالها، الطبقات التي لم يعترف بها سياسيا ولم يعترف بها على مستوى أفكارها وآرائها لا بد من إدخالها. لا بد أن نتصالح مع أنفسنا. إذا تصالحنا مع أنفسنا تيار التحكم سيرجع إلى حدوده، والتشدد كما كان دائما سوف يبقى، ولكن سوف يصبح مهمشا، والعالم ساعتها سيكون لنا مكانة فيه تفرض عليه أن يأخذ بعين الاعتبار مواقفنا، وساعتها يمكن الانتخابات الإسرائيلية تأخذنا بعين الاعتبار، أما لحد الآن ما تأخذنا بعين الاعتبار.
Well, basically what Mr. Ben-Kiran is saying is that authoritarianism and extremism are mutually supportive, and basically they try to sort of alternate in power between themselves. But there are other social classes, the people, he says, who are not represented yet and can only be represented by a moderate line. And moderate line can represent these people and speak for them.
بقيت نقطة واحدة بسيطة.
تفضل.
الذين يعني ينطلقون من المرجعية الإسلامية، هؤلاء يجب أن يفهموا أن دورهم أن يساعدوا بلدانهم على أن تتقدم. إذا فقط كانوا سوف يرجعونها إلى الأزمات ما ينفعون.
Now, a last word for those who sort of take Islam as their reference. If they only want to sort of impose on the rest of the society their views, they are not going anywhere. They need to serve their people and not only to impose.
المطالبة بالحق التي تكون نتيجتها زيادة المشاكل على الأمة هذه في النهاية الناس ينظرون إلى المقاصد، ما الذي يحصل حقيقة. ممكن تكون إسلامي، لكن إذا كنت ستخرب الدنيا ماذا سنفعل بك؟
An Islamist is as accountable as anybody else, and therefore it is by what happens when Islam comes to power that these guys will be judged, not by what they say in public. Now, Mr. Jibril, you had a question from Mr. Janahi.
I'll try to deal with three levels of analysis in responding to his question. The first level is that what Mr. Ben-Kiran told us just now, the democratic nationalist stream of thought in the Arab world, Unfortunately, this is a reactive movement, The elites in the Arab world, especially who advocating democracy, they are reacting, but they did not offer any alternative to those extremist movements. I can draw the attention here, or the comparison between two cases. During the 19th century, there was an awakening movement where Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani, Muhammad Abdu took place, It was an intellectual movement. They had a model, but there was no action in the street. It came years later. What happened in the Arab uprising now is exactly the opposite. People came to the street, but without any intellectual frame. There was no model. There was no dream that they go for. So when the regimes fell down, everybody was claiming legitimacy. Everybody was claiming the monopoly of that revolution, of that uprising. And everybody is claiming credit for bringing the regime down. And this is a problem. The door or the role of the elite who are talking about democracy or talking about national aspiration is to develop a model, to develop a dream for those young people. Otherwise, it would be just an empty shot in the air. This is the first level. If we come down to the Libyan case, I would say there are also two levels. The first level is how to stop the bleeding. I would go, a national dialogue is needed, but a national dialogue that should consider and recognize that there is a huge gap of mistrust between the Libyans, that we should deal with it. Two, that there is no exclusion for anybody. Anybody who accepts a civil state, who doesn't resort to violence, to express his political desires, political objectives, should be included in this national dialogue. Libya is for all and should be built by all Libyans. This number two. In terms of concrete actions, we should start right away a decentralized government where municipalities should start providing services for the people. The economy should be reactivated again in all those cities. We have only about 5 Libyan cities which is full of arms and full of militias. But the rest of the Libyan cities are totally safe. There is no excuse for any Libyan government to wait till this problem is solved. Why don't we restart rebuilding the state from the periphery instead of focusing on the center? This will start giving a hope for those young people. New jobs are created. Even those who accumulated lots of wealth during the last 4 years, there will be an opportunity for their money to be invested in different economic projects. Therefore, this does not exclude the strategic path where a new educational system is needed, a new look at our religion, where man is mandated by God to be creator on this earth, should be also reactivated. Mosques have a new role to play. I mean, this is what I call a real cultural revolution that's needed to create. My God, terrorism became a job. It's not an activity anymore. And this is the problem.
Thank you. We still have 5 minutes. I would like to give the floor later to Prime Minister Mikati, who's here with us. But I can't have this meeting end without saying a word about the largest humanitarian disaster the 20th century has known, that is Syria. I mean, at least 200,000 people have been killed already, and we didn't mention the word Syria. I recognize in the room the Special Representative of the United Nations, and I would like at least Amr and Dr. Iyad in one shot to give him their advice. What is better done to sort of alleviate the tragedy, the Syrian tragedy? Amr.
Well, the situation in Syria is so complicated, and I don't think a separate approach would do, because of the accumulation of number of the refugees displaced and so on. Now is the worst moment for them in winter. And I'm sure that the UN has done all it can. The Arab countries have done all they can, but we all fell short of dealing with it properly, with this problem properly. And as Prime Minister Mikati is here, I have to make a special mention of Lebanon and what Lebanon has done, and what Lebanon has hosted a big number for them. But we have to do more, and the political solution for Syria will have to be worked for, and for big countries, permanent members will have to abandon the policy of managing crisis. They have to address the crisis. They are, as we have seen in Palestine and many other problems, there is a problem, difficult to solve, so it is better to manage and keep going here and there. So I hope that the special representative, who is an old hand in all those issues, will take into consideration the point that managing the crisis is against basic rights and will add to the problem of refugees and displaced.
Prime Minister Mikati.
Dr. Salami, question. just, I would like that you clarify. ISIS, it is the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. What they are doing in Libya.
Well, it is,
So it's becoming a generic name.
yes.
Yes.
What's the reason of existing such generic name today in Arab society? That's another question that we have to elaborate, I guess. So it's not anymore Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. It is becoming a movement in this Islamic State.
Trans-regional. Last word to Dr. Iyad, possibly to address this question
Well,
by Mr. Mikati.
I think if we count the displaced and the refugees and those who are unfortunately being killed, the numbers amount to millions of people, not only 200,000 or around this figure. And really, I cannot see any way but for the international community and the regional community to help as much as they can and to resolve the problems as quick as possible. We cannot wait for people to decide at leisure what to do and what to have, and otherwise, every day passing, we are losing people. And people are getting displaced and getting seeking refugees and status in different countries. For the situation, and this is, by the way, this is when you look at Lebanon or you look at Jordan, quarter of the population now is from Syria. 1 million. And we have in Iraq, inside Iraq, only displaced is 2 millions. But that's why it's very difficult, and I think the UN is aware of these enormous problems, but I don't think they have a solution for this issue.
Thank you all on this not very positive note, but still realistic one. Thank you all for being with us. Very nice. But the realization and other events we need to get ready for. That is why we have people who have been in responsible position and can come back to responsible position, who are now in responsible position, as is the first one to address the issue. That is the Prime Minister of Morocco, Mr. Ben Kiran, who is now, I would say, an habitué of Davos. Mr. Ben Kiran, the floor is yours. How do you see the next year or two from your point of view?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أولا أترحم على جلالة الملك عبد الله، شخص الطرفية ليس كملك خوي فقط ولكن كشخص مؤمن بالله.
I'm sorry, there is no translation, but I will summarize for non-Arabic speaker because Mr. Ben Kiran is the only one who is going to speak in Arabic. I'll summarize his statement at the end.
Je suis devenu un habitué, mais vous avez perdu l'habitude de traduire.
Je vais traduire.
ثانيا يعني ثقافتنا مبنية على التفاؤل، وأنا متفائل إن شاء الله الرحمن الرحيم للمستقبل. بطبيعة الحال الأمور ليست سهلة، لا تبدو سهلة، لكن إذا كل طرف فهم دوره الطبيعي والحضاري الذي هو أن يساهم في أن يتقدم بلده، تتقدم أمته، وأعطينا اليد لبعضنا البعض، إن شاء الله الرحمن الرحيم تكون الأمور يعني جيدة. وأظن أنه نحن وإن كنا جميعا أبناء ثقافة واحدة ونتلو كلام الله باستمرار لا نفقهه جيدا. هنالك أمران في القرآن الكريم، الأمر الأول بالتعاون على البر والتقوى، والأمر الثاني بعدم التنازع. نحن تركنا التعاون، ذهبنا إلى التنازع، وهذا ما نحاول أن نتجنبه في المغرب، وهذا ما بحمد الله إلى حد الآن ترك المغرب يعني لنقل في العموم دولة الأمور فيها تسير بطريقة إيجابية.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Could you summarize rapidly, or do you want me to do that? Okay. Well, he basically said that in the Quran there are at least two instructions to human beings not to get into conflict and cooperate. And that, good afternoon, everybody. Apparently Switzerland neighbors have no respect for Swiss watches. That's why Previous large meeting started late, and that's why we are starting late as well, because of that. Thank you all for being here. We are supposed to discuss, to look into the future. Not the very distant future, but the very proximate one. And to think what is going to happen in the Arab world, to the Arab countries. And for that, we have 5 extremely well-established speakers for that. The future is made of a number of events we can predict. I can tell you that that part of the world is going to be affected by elections in Israel on March the 17th, or elections in Turkey in June. I can tell you that there are also other expected events, like, for example, if the oil price remains below $60, that's 20% of what it was like 6 months ago. We have been in the past few years doing the conflict side, but not so much cooperation. He believes that Morocco is leading the way into establishing forms of cooperation in the near future. This is a very quick summary. I am moving now to a country at war, we can say that, at war.
Yes.
And the former Prime Minister of Iraq, Iyad Allawi, is going to sort of tell us how he sees the next 12, 18 months.
So shall we speak in English or Arabic?
Please do.
Okay. In fact, the transformation, we are in the middle of transformation now. Not only Iraq, but the region as a whole. And we don't know, we cannot predict precisely what will be happening in the near future, let alone the distant future from now. I think we face severe variables, including now in the Arab world, including, of course, bloodshed and turmoil, foreign interferences. And we have at least a score of states which have been dismantled and are non-functional anymore, like Libya.
It means that political money is going to flow in much smaller figures to various conflicts. This we can predict. We can also predict that in the next few months, open battles are going to be waged, like the battles the alliance is waging against ISIS in Iraq and partly in Syria. This we can also predict. What we cannot predict are political events that have impact on the situation, but are to a certain extent unpredictable, not to their realization, but to their timing. Of course, we all knew that, as we say in Arabic, ages are in the hands of God. We all knew that the King of Saudi Arabia was 94, but nobody knew that he will pass away now. And we also know that this is going to have an impact, and that the passing away of other leaders in that part of the world can also have impact. So we have events we can predict, not necessarily their effect. We don't know who's going to win this or that election.